A routine welfare check on two missing sisters becomes my career-ending nightmare. I enter a house reeking of bleach where a meth-addicted mother believes she's purifying her daughters from demons. In the bathroom, I discover 6-year-old Grace's body floating in a tub of concentrated bleach. Her sister Lily whispers, "She made us drink the white water every day." What horrors were hidden behind that door locked from the outside? Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. My name is Detective Jack Whitaker. For 23 years I worked major crimes for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. In that time I've seen everything from gang killings to family murders. I worked serial killer cases and child kidnapping cases. I thought I had built the kind of mental armor that lets you sleep at night after seeing the worst things humans can do. I was wrong. The case that ended my career began on a Tuesday morning in October. We got a call from Child Protective Services. They needed us to help with a welfare check on two sisters. The girls were 13 and 6 years old. They hadn't been seen at school for over 3 weeks. Their mother was Deborah Kramer. She had a history with CPS involving drugs and neglect, but the girls had been returned to her 6 months earlier. She had finished court-ordered treatment programs. I was partnered that day with Detective Claire Bennett. She was a 10-year veteran who worked crimes against children. We'd worked together before on cases that needed careful handling. Cases where the difference between life and death often came down to how we first approached suspects. Claire understood child psychology in a way that had saved lives in the past. I trusted her instincts completely. As we drove to the address in a rundown section of North Sacramento, Claire looked through the case file. The morning was overcast with that gray Sacramento sky that seems to press down on everything. It made even routine calls feel scary. Mother is Deborah Kramer, 34, unemployed. History of meth addiction dating back 8 years, she read from the folder. Multiple arrests for possession. 2 previous cases of child endangerment that resulted in temporary removal of the children. Current boyfriend is Dennis Kellerman, 41, multiple priors for drug possession and domestic violence, including a conviction for assault with a deadly weapon in 2018. She flipped through several pages. The girls are Lily, 13, honor roll student before her recent absences, and Grace, 6. Teachers describe her as bright and social. Last confirmed sighting was at Franklin Elementary 3 weeks ago. School officials report that Lily called in sick for Grace multiple times, but they became concerned when neither girl appeared for picture day. Lily had been looking forward to that. I made mental notes as we drove through neighborhoods that told their own story of hard times. Chain link fences topped with razor wire, windows covered with security bars, yards littered with broken appliances and abandoned cars. This was territory where domestic violence calls were routine, where children learned to hide when they heard raised voices, where neighbors minded their own business because getting involved could be dangerous. The house we were looking for sat at the end of a dead-end street. It was isolated even by the standards of the neighborhood. It was a small single-story rental that had probably been built in the 1960s. It hadn't seen maintenance in decades. The front yard was overgrown with weeds that reached nearly to the windows. Several of those windows were covered with aluminum foil from the inside, a classic sign of meth production or use. "Look at the utility meter," Claire observed as we parked. "It's been tampered with, probably stealing electricity." A rusted chain link fence surrounded the property. The gate hung open on broken hinges. As we approached the front door, I noticed other details that set off my internal alarm system. Newspaper delivery bags scattered across the porch, mail overflowing from a broken mailbox, what appeared to be chemical stains on the concrete steps. The paint on the front door was peeling, showing several layers of previous colors underneath. 3 different deadbolts had been installed at various heights. This suggested either paranoia or multiple break-in attempts. The doorbell appeared to be broken, hanging from loose wires. I knocked and announced ourselves with the practiced authority that comes from years of uncertain encounters. Sacramento County Sheriff's Department, we need to speak with Deborah Kramer. No answer. The silence from inside the house felt heavy, unnatural. Most homes, even empty ones, have background sounds. Appliances running, clocks ticking, floors settling. This house was quiet in a way that suggested deliberate concealment. I knocked again, harder this time. Police, open the door. We need to conduct a welfare check. After several long minutes, we heard shuffling footsteps inside, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The process took nearly 2 minutes. I counted at least 5 different locks being opened. Finally, the door opened just wide enough to reveal a woman's face. Deborah Kramer looked like a textbook example of advanced meth addiction. Her face was gaunt with sunken cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. Those spoke of days or weeks without proper sleep. Her skin had the grayish color common to chronic drug users. Her hair was greasy and unkempt. Most disturbing were her eyes. They darted constantly, never focusing on our faces for more than a second. They showed the paranoid watchfulness of someone deep in psychosis. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse and suspicious. Her hands trembled as she gripped the door frame. "Miss Kramer, I'm Detective Whitaker. This is Detective Bennett. We need to check on Lily and Grace. They haven't been at school for 3 weeks. We need to make sure they're okay." The woman's eyes darted nervously between us, then to the street behind us, as if checking for additional threats. "They're fine. They're just sick. Bad flu, very contagious. You shouldn't come in." "We need to see them," Claire said firmly but not aggressively. Her tone was the one she used when she sensed a situation could escalate quickly. "It's just a welfare check. We can do this easy, or we can get a warrant and come back with more officers. Your choice." Deborah hesitated for nearly a minute. I could see her internal struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she stepped back and opened the door wider, but her body language remained defensive, as if she expected us to attack her at any moment. The smell hit us immediately, a chemical odor so strong it made my eyes water and my throat burn. It was bleach, but not the clean scent you'd associate with normal household cleaning. This was overwhelming, acrid industrial strength. Like someone had poured gallons of commercial-grade disinfectant throughout the house and left it to concentrate in the stale air. "Jesus Christ," Claire muttered under her breath, covering her nose with her sleeve. I had to blink several times to clear my eyes as we stepped into the living room. The interior of the house was even more disturbing than the exterior had suggested. The room was sparsely furnished with a sagging couch that looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster, an old television with a cracked screen, a coffee table covered with empty fast food containers and what appeared to be drug paraphernalia. But it was the carpet that immediately caught my attention. The entire floor was covered with irregular white patches, bleach stains that had eaten away the color and fiber, leaving the carpet looking like it had been attacked with acid. The stains weren't random. They formed patterns that suggested systematic application, as if someone had deliberately poured bleach in specific areas. The walls showed similar damage. White streaks ran from ceiling to floor in several places. There were splash patterns that looked like someone had thrown bleach with considerable force. The chemical damage was so extensive that the drywall itself was beginning to deteriorate in some areas. "Ma'am, what happened to your carpet?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the growing alarm bells in my head. "Cleaning," Deborah said quickly. "Had to clean everything, had to make it pure." That word pure sent a chill down my spine. In my experience, when parents started talking about purity in connection with their children, it usually meant something terrible was happening or had already happened. As we moved deeper into the house, I noticed other details that painted a picture of complete dysfunction. The windows were not just covered with aluminum foil, they were sealed with duct tape around the edges, blocking out all natural light. Extension cords ran along the walls, powering space heaters and lamps. This suggested the main electrical system wasn't functioning properly. The kitchen was visible through an archway. What I could see made my stomach turn. Dishes covered in mold were stacked in the sink. The countertops were stained with the same bleach patterns we'd seen throughout the house. Several empty gallon jugs that had contained bleach were lined up against one wall like soldiers in formation. "Where are the girls?" Claire asked, her professional composure intact despite the increasingly disturbing environment. "In their room," Deborah said, pointing down a short hallway. "They're sleeping. They sleep a lot now. The medicine makes them tired." "What medicine?" I asked immediately. "The cleaning medicine. It helps purify their blood." Dennis explained it to me. He knows about these things. The hallway was narrow and dark, lit only by a single bare bulb that cast harsh shadows on the walls. The carpet here showed the same bleach damage. The chemical smell was even stronger. As we walked, I noticed that the walls were covered with what appeared to be religious imagery. Crosses drawn in what looked like bleach. Bible verses written in shaky handwriting directly on the drywall. "Ms. Kramer, we're going to need you to step outside while we check on the children," Claire said. "This chemical smell is a health hazard and we need to assess the situation." "No," Deborah said quickly, her voice rising in pitch. "You can't take them. They're clean now. I worked so hard to make them clean. The demons are almost gone." That phrase, "the demons are almost gone," made my blood run cold. I'd worked enough cases involving severe mental illness to recognize the language of dangerous delusion. When parents started talking about demons in connection with their children, it usually meant they had been systematically abusing them under the guise of spiritual purification. We found the first bedroom door. Immediately I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. The door had been modified with a sliding bolt lock installed on the outside. Positioned high up on the door, far beyond the reach of a child, fresh scratches around the bolt suggested it had been used recently and frequently. "Ms. Kramer, we need you to unlock this door right now," I said, my hand instinctively moving toward my weapon. Not because I expected violence, but because I was preparing for whatever we might find on the other side of that door. "They're sleeping," she repeated, but her hands were shaking violently as she reached for the bolt. "They sleep better when it's locked. The demons can't get in when it's locked." Claire and I exchanged glances. We both knew we were no longer dealing with a simple welfare check. This had become a potential rescue situation. We needed to be prepared for anything. The bolt slid back with a metallic scraping sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the narrow hallway. Deborah pushed the door open slowly, as if she was afraid of what we might see. The room beyond was a chamber of horrors, disguised as a child's bedroom. It was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, with no windows and no ventilation except for what came through the door. 2 single mattresses lay on the floor, both stained with bleach and what I immediately recognized as vomit. The walls were covered with the same bleach damage we'd seen throughout the house, but here it was more concentrated, more deliberate. Someone had systematically doused every surface with chemicals. On one mattress lay a girl who appeared to be 13, though her physical condition made it difficult to tell for certain. She was curled in a fetal position, wearing clothes that were too large for her emaciated frame. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin had a grayish pallor. Her breathing was shallow and labored. She looked up at us with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone her age. There was no surprise in her expression, no hope, just a kind of resigned awareness that suggested she had been expecting this moment for a long time. The other mattress was empty, but the stains on it told a story I didn't want to contemplate. "Where's Grace?" Claire demanded immediately, kneeling beside the older girl and checking her vital signs. "She's clean now," Deborah said from the doorway, her voice taking on an almost sing-song quality. "She couldn't stop being dirty inside, so I had to make her extra clean. The demons were very strong in her." The 13-year-old girl, Lily, tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Claire leaned in close to hear her. I saw her face go pale as she processed whatever the girl was telling her. "She made us drink the white water," Lily whispered, her words barely audible. "Every day, more and more white water." Grace couldn't throw it up fast enough. I tried to help her, but she was too little. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach. White water, bleach solution. This mother had been systematically poisoning her own children, believing she was purifying them of demonic influence. "Where is Grace right now?" I asked Deborah again, struggling to keep my voice level. "In the bathroom," she said, her expression becoming dreamy, disconnected, still getting clean. "She's been in there for 3 days now. The demons are very stubborn." I pushed past her and found the bathroom door at the end of the hallway. Like the bedroom, it had been fitted with an exterior lock. This time I didn't wait for permission. I forced the lock and pushed the door open. The bathroom was small and windowless, lit by a single bare bulb that cast everything in harsh, unforgiving light. The bathtub was filled with a pale liquid that I immediately recognized as a concentrated bleach solution. The smell was so intense it burned my throat and made my eyes stream. Floating in the tub face down was the body of a small girl. She was wearing a nightgown that had been bleached white. Her dark hair fanned out around her head like seaweed. Her skin had taken on the waxy appearance of prolonged chemical exposure. "Call for backup and EMTs now," I told Claire, my training taking over even as my mind reeled from what I was seeing. "And get hazmat here. This whole place is contaminated. Don't let anyone else in here without proper protection." Claire was already on her radio calling for emergency response while trying to keep Lily conscious and alert. The girl was in critical condition, suffering from what was obviously severe chemical poisoning that had been going on for an extended period. I couldn't touch anything in that bathroom without proper protective equipment. But I could see enough to know that 6-year-old Grace Kramer was dead. Her death had been anything but natural. As we waited for backup, Deborah Kramer began talking. Not confessing exactly, but rambling in the disconnected way of someone whose mind had been destroyed by drugs and delusion. Her words painted a picture of systematic abuse that had escalated over months. It was driven by meth-induced paranoia and what appeared to be genuine psychotic beliefs about demonic possession. "They were dirty inside," she kept saying, her voice taking on that sing-song quality again. "The demons got in them somehow, maybe at school, maybe from other children. I could see them sometimes moving under their skin. Dennis told me how to clean them. He said the white water kills demons if you use enough of it." "Where is Dennis now?" I asked, though I was more focused on documenting the scene and making sure Lily got the medical attention she desperately needed. "He went to get more white water," Deborah said matter-of-factly. "We used almost all of it, making them clean. Grace needed extra cleaning because her demons were very strong. Little children always have the strongest demons because they haven't learned to fight them yet." Over the next hour, our quiet welfare check became a major crime scene investigation. Hazmat teams arrived to process the contaminated house and determine whether it was safe for investigators to work inside. EMTs rushed Lily to UC Davis Medical Center, where she would spend the next month in intensive care. She was recovering from severe chemical poisoning that had damaged her throat, stomach, and nervous system. The coroner's office took custody of Grace's body, though the preliminary examination would have to wait until the chemical contamination could be properly assessed. Even the coroner's van had to be decontaminated after the body bag was loaded. I had to walk through that house wearing a hazmat suit and breathing apparatus. I documented every detail of what Deborah Kramer had done to her daughters in the name of making them clean. The full extent of the horror became clear as we processed the scene over the following days. The house contained enough commercial-grade bleach to fill several bathtubs. It was stored in containers throughout the building. Chemical analysis would later show that the abuse had been going on for months, escalating gradually as Deborah's delusions intensified. The girl's bedroom showed evidence of repeated vomiting. bleach stains on the walls where they had apparently tried to expel the poison they were being forced to consume. Forensic analysis found traces of blood mixed with the bleach stains. This indicated that the chemical burns in their throats and stomachs had been bleeding for some time. But it was the bathroom that provided the most disturbing evidence. The bathtub contained a solution that was nearly 30% bleach, a concentration that would cause severe chemical burns on contact with skin. Grace's body showed evidence of prolonged immersion with chemical burns covering most of her exposed skin. Most horrifying was the discovery that this wasn't the first time Grace had been placed in the bleach bath. The medical examiner found evidence of previous chemical burns that had partially healed. This indicated that she had been subjected to this torture multiple times over a period of weeks. The living areas of the house told their own story of escalating madness. The walls were covered with religious messages written in bleach, biblical quotations about purification and the casting out of demons. Deborah had apparently been documenting her purification process on the walls themselves, creating a twisted chronicle of abuse disguised as salvation. When Dennis Kellerman was arrested 2 days later, he was carrying enough bleach to fill the bathtub 3 times over. During his interrogation, he claimed that he had only been trying to help Deborah cleanse her daughters of evil influences. He insisted that the bleach consumption was Deborah's idea, though he admitted to providing the chemicals and reinforcing her delusions about demonic possession. She was convinced those kids were infected with something evil, he told investigators during his confession. I tried to tell her that regular cleaning would be enough, but she said the demons were inside them, in their blood. She said the only way to get them out was to purify them from the inside. The forensic evidence painted a different picture. Kellerman had a history of bizarre religious beliefs. He had apparently convinced Deborah that her children were possessed. Text messages recovered from his phone showed that he had been encouraging her to increase the frequency and concentration of the bleach treatments. One message sent 3 days before Grace's death read, "The little one is fighting the treatment. You need to be stronger. The demons know you're close to victory. Don't let them win now." Another message sent the day before we found the girls was even more chilling. If the treatment isn't working, maybe she needs to stay in the white water longer. Sometimes the demons hide deep inside and you have to drown them out. Deborah's mental state evaluation revealed severe meth-induced psychosis complicated by what appeared to be genuine delusions about demonic possession. The psychiatrists who examined her couldn't determine whether the possession beliefs had preceded the drug use or were a result of it, but they agreed that she had genuinely believed she was saving her daughters' souls. Dr. Rebecca Harrison, the forensic psychiatrist who conducted the evaluation, described Deborah's mental state as one of the most severe cases of drug-induced psychosis she had encountered. The patient exhibits complete detachment from reality regarding the nature of her actions. She wrote in her report, she continues to believe that her daughters were infected with demonic entities and that her actions were necessary for their spiritual salvation. The most disturbing aspect of Deborah's condition was her inability to comprehend that she had harmed her children. Even when confronted with Grace's death, she insisted that the white water treatment had been successful in removing the demons. She believed Grace was now clean and pure in heaven. Lily's recovery was slow and complicated by the extensive chemical damage to her digestive system and nervous system. She had lost 23 pounds in the weeks before we found her. Her throat was so damaged by chemical burns that she couldn't speak above a whisper for the first month of her hospitalization. The child psychologist who worked with Lily during her recovery, Dr. Henry Bell, described her as one of the most severely traumatized children he had ever treated. She had been living in a state of constant terror for months, he explained. She knew her mother was slowly killing her and her sister, but she was powerless to stop it or escape. During her interviews with Dr. Bell, Lily provided details about the systematic abuse that painted an even more horrific picture than the physical evidence had suggested. According to Lily, the white water treatments had started small, just a few drops of bleach in their drinking water, which Deborah claimed would purify their blood. At first, it just tasted bad, Lily told Dr. Bell. Mama said it was medicine to keep us healthy, but then she started giving us more and more, and it burned our mouths and throats. When I told her it hurt, she said that was the demons fighting the medicine. As Deborah's delusions intensified, the treatments became more frequent and more concentrated. Lily learned to vomit immediately after being forced to drink the bleach. She tried to teach Grace to do the same, but Grace was only 6 years old and she couldn't master the technique quickly enough to prevent the chemical from being absorbed into her system. I would hide with Grace behind the couch or in the closet and help her throw up, Lily explained. But sometimes Mama would watch us and make sure we swallowed it. She said if we threw it up, the demons would stay inside us forever. The forced consumption of bleach wasn't the only abuse the girls endured. Deborah had also been giving them bleach baths, forcing them to sit in tubs filled with increasingly concentrated chemical solutions. Lily described the pain as like being on fire all over, but Deborah interpreted their screams and tears as evidence that the demons were being expelled. Most heartbreaking was Lily's account of Grace's final days. The 6-year-old had become too weak to vomit effectively. The constant chemical poisoning had left her barely conscious most of the time. Deborah interpreted Grace's deteriorating condition as a sign that the treatment was working, that the demons were finally being defeated. Grace stopped being able to walk or talk, Lily remembered. She would just lie on her mattress and shake. Mama said that was the demons trying to hold on, but that they were getting weaker. She said Grace would be perfect once all the demons were gone. On the night Grace died, Deborah had forced her to drink nearly a full cup of undiluted bleach. According to Lily, Grace had convulsions for several hours before she stopped breathing. Instead of calling for help, Deborah had carried Grace's body to the bathroom and placed her in a tub filled with bleach solution. Mama said Grace had to stay in the white water until all the demons came out of her body, Lily told Dr. Bell. She said once Grace was completely clean, she would wake up and be perfect forever. For the next 3 days, Deborah had continued the treatments on Lily while Grace's body remained in the bathroom. Lily survived only because she had perfected the technique of immediate vomiting and because we found her when we did. The case went to trial 14 months later after Lily had recovered enough to testify. The proceedings were complicated by Deborah's continued insistence that she had been acting in her daughter's best interests. Also by the question of whether Dennis Kellerman had been a co-conspirator or a manipulator who had taken advantage of Deborah's mental illness. The prosecution, led by Senior Deputy District Attorney Rachel Wong, argued that both defendants had engaged in systematic torture and murder under the guise of religious purification. These were not the actions of a loving mother trying to help her children, Wong told the jury during her opening statement. This was deliberate, calculated abuse that escalated over months until it resulted in the death of a 6-year-old girl. The defense strategy focused on Deborah's severe mental illness and drug addiction. They argued that she had been incapable of forming the intent necessary for murder charges. Deborah's attorney, public defender Michael Roberts, brought in experts to testify about the effects of chronic meth use on cognitive function and reality perception. Deborah Kramer was not a monster, Roberts argued. She was a severely ill woman whose drug addiction had destroyed her ability to distinguish between reality and delusion. In her mind, she was saving her children's souls, not harming their bodies. But the prosecution's case was overwhelming. Lily's testimony, delivered via closed-circuit television to protect her from further trauma, provided a detailed account of months of systematic abuse. The physical evidence, the chemically damaged house, the concentrated bleach solutions, the evidence of prolonged torture, supported every aspect of her testimony. Perhaps most damning was the text message evidence showing Dennis Kellerman's role in encouraging and directing the abuse. His messages to Deborah revealed a man who understood exactly what was happening and chose to escalate rather than intervene. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Deborah was convicted of second-degree murder for Grace's death, attempted murder and multiple counts of child abuse for what she did to Lily, and felony child endangerment. She was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Dennis Kellerman, who had testified against Deborah as part of a plea agreement, was convicted of conspiracy, child endangerment, and accessory to murder. He received a sentence of 25 years to life in state prison, but for me, the case didn't end with the convictions. It followed me home every night, crept into my dreams, and changed the way I looked at every subsequent case involving children. The smell was the worst part. That chemical odor seemed to have penetrated not just my clothes and hair, but somehow gotten into my very pores. For months after processing that house, I would catch whiffs of bleach in random places. The grocery store, my own bathroom, even outdoors on windy days, and immediately feel nauseated and disoriented. My wife, Carmen, started to worry when I began having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night thinking about Grace Kramer, a 6-year-old girl who died believing her mother was trying to save her soul. I thought about Lily, who survived by becoming an expert at vomiting poison, who had to watch her little sister die while being powerless to prevent it. The department psychologist, Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, explained that what I was experiencing was secondary trauma, a common reaction among law enforcement officers who work cases involving extreme child abuse. She recommended counseling and suggested I take some time off to process what I had experienced. But I couldn't get past the details that kept surfacing during quiet moments. The fact that Grace's body showed evidence of multiple previous chemical burns. This indicated this wasn't the first time she had been subjected to bleach baths. The discovery that Lily had developed a sophisticated system for hiding the evidence of their forced vomiting, because she understood that their survival depended on their mother not knowing they were rejecting the poison. Most haunting was learning that both girls had been on the radar of Child Protective Services for over a year. But Deborah had managed to convince caseworkers during supervised visits that she was clean and stable enough to maintain custody. The system had failed them at every level. A 6-year-old girl had died as a result. Carmen suggested I talk to someone outside the department, maybe a private therapist who specialized in trauma. But every time I tried to schedule an appointment, I would imagine trying to explain to a civilian what I had seen in that house. I couldn't find the words. How do you describe the sight of a child's bedroom where the walls are stained with bleach and vomit? How do you convey the horror of finding a 6-year-old's body floating in a bathtub full of chemicals? How do you make someone understand the sound a 13-year-old makes when she whispers that she tried to save her sister, but wasn't strong enough? 3 months after Deborah's sentencing, I realized I couldn't continue working major crimes. Every case involving children reminded me of Lily and Grace. Every domestic violence call made me wonder what might be happening behind locked doors. Every welfare check filled me with dread about what we might find. I put in for early retirement 2 weeks before my 52nd birthday. I was young enough to start a second career, but I couldn't bring myself to walk into another house where our children might be suffering. The job that had defined my adult life suddenly felt impossible to continue. The final straw came during what should have been a routine follow-up interview with a teenage witness to a gang shooting. The kid was nervous, kept glancing toward the door of the interview room. When I asked him what was wrong, he said the room smelled like cleaning supplies and it was making him sick. I hadn't noticed any chemical smell, but suddenly I was back in that house on the dead-end street, breathing through a respirator and documenting the systematic torture of 2 little girls. I had to excuse myself from the interview and spend 20 minutes in the parking lot, trying to regain my composure. That's when I knew I was done. 23 years of police work, and I was finished by the case that showed me how far human beings could fall while still believing they were doing good. I moved to Oregon and took a position as a security supervisor at a small college in Eugene. The work was peaceful, mostly involving minor incidents with students and the occasional property crime. It was the kind of job where the worst thing that might happen was a broken window or a stolen laptop. Problems that could be solved without exposing anyone to additional trauma. But even now, 7 years later, I can't use bleach in my own home. The smell immediately transports me back to that house in North Sacramento, to those stained carpets and that locked bathroom door where a 6-year-old girl died believing her mother loved her. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had been called for that welfare check even one day earlier. Would Grace still be alive? Could we have prevented the final fatal dose of poison that stopped her heart? But I know that kind of thinking is pointless. The abuse had been going on for months, escalating gradually as Deborah's delusions deepened. Grace was already severely damaged by chemical poisoning when we found the house. Even if we had arrived earlier, she might not have survived the extensive damage to her internal organs. Lily recovered physically from her ordeal, though the psychological scars will likely last a lifetime. She was placed with relatives in Colorado. According to the last report I received, she was doing well in school and therapy. She's 21 now, a young woman who survived something that should have killed her. I hope she's found a way to have a normal life despite everything she experienced. I hope she's learned to trust people again, to believe that not all adults are dangerous, that the world contains more good than evil. But I know she carries scars that will never fully heal. Every time she smells bleach, she's probably transported back to that locked bedroom where she learned to vomit poison to survive. Every time she sees a little girl Grace's age, she probably thinks about the sister she couldn't save. The hardest part of the Kramer case wasn't the violence or the drugs or even the horrific method of murder. It was the realization that Deborah genuinely believed she was saving her daughter's souls. In her chemically damaged mind, forcing them to drink poison was an act of maternal love, a desperate attempt to protect them from something she perceived as even worse than death. That's the kind of evil that's hardest to understand and hardest to forget. Not the calculated cruelty of predators who know they're causing harm, but the delusional love of parents who destroy their children while trying to protect them from imaginary threats. Every time I see a 6-year-old girl now, I think about Grace Kramer and wonder what kind of person she might have grown up to be, what dreams she might have pursued, what contributions she might have made to the world, what children of her own she might have raised with actual love instead of poisonous delusion. All of that potential was erased by someone who thought she was acting out of love, someone who confused torture with salvation and murder with purification. The smell of bleach will always take me back to that house, to those stained carpets and that bathroom door that should never have been locked from the outside. It reminds me that sometimes the most terrible crimes are committed by people who believe they're doing good, that evil doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like. In my new job, walking the quiet campus of a small college, I sometimes have to respond to minor incidents. Students who've had too much to drink, minor thefts, the occasional domestic dispute between young couples. These problems feel manageable, solvable, normal in a way that gives me hope about human nature and the possibility of redemption. But late at night, when the campus is quiet and I'm making my final rounds, I sometimes find myself checking and double-checking locked doors, making sure all the windows are properly secured. Because I know now that the worst things happen in places where no one is watching. Behind doors that are locked from the outside, in houses where the smell of cleaning products masks something much more sinister than dirt.